The great hall of the Concorde station shone with light. Towers of glass and crystal spread out above the crowd, reflecting the colors of dozens of alien worlds. Music unlike anything human ears had ever known filled the air, soft and strange, but it carried a rhythm that even Daniel could feel in his chest. He stood stiffly in his dress uniform, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes wandering nervously over the crowd. It was the first time humans had been invited to such an event, and he felt like a child lost in a palace. Around him moved beings of every size and shape. Some were tall and slender, their skin like liquid silver. Others had wings that shimmered in the glow of the chandeliers, each feather catching the light like tiny jewels. A few towered so high that Daniel barely reached their knees. Each alien wore ceremonial robes, adorned with symbols of ancient power, their movements graceful and confident. The humans, by comparison, were plain and awkward, their uniforms stiff and simple. Daniel could see the way some of the aliens looked at them, amused, dismissive, as if humans were nothing more than newcomers playing at greatness. Daniel kept his head low, trying not to attract attention. He was just a junior officer standing near the back with a few others. The important humans, ambassadors, generals, scientists, were already mingling with the conquered leaders, smiling politely, bowing stiffly, trying to prove that humans belonged here. Daniel wished he could disappear into the wall, but then his eyes caught her. At the far end of the hall, on a platform raised above the crowd, stood the royal family of the Illyrians. They were known as one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The king stood tall, his presence commanding, his voice deep as he spoke with the Concorde Council. Around him were attendants in robes of glowing silk, but Daniel barely noticed them. His eyes locked on the princess. She stood slightly apart from the others, her figure wrapped in a flowing gown that seemed alive with light. Her hair shimmered like threads of starlight cascading over her shoulders. Her eyes, bright and unearthly, searched the hall with quiet curiosity. Every movement she made was elegant, as if the air itself bent to follow her. Daniel felt his breath catch. "She's so gorgeous," he whispered. He had meant to say it, only to himself, a thought that slipped past his lips without permission. His voice was quiet, barely more than a breath. He thought the noise of the music, the chatter of the crowd, the hum of alien voices would swallow his words. He thought no one could have heard, but she did. The princess turned her head, her gaze, finding him across the hall. For one impossible moment her eyes locked with his. Daniel's heart stumbled in his chest. He wanted to vanish, to hide, to take back the words that had escaped, but instead he stood frozen, his face burning. To his surprise, she did not look offended. She did not frown or turn away in disgust. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, as if she had just discovered something amusing. She tilted her head, studying him from afar as though she had never seen a creature quite like him before. Daniel quickly looked down, pretending to adjust his collar, his mind racing. Had she really heard him? Maybe it was a trick of the light, a mistake. But the memory of her smile burned in his thoughts. He felt both terrified and strangely alive. Around him, his fellow officers continued their polite silence, unaware of what had just happened. The hall moved on, speeches continued, toasts were raised. Yet Daniel felt as if the universe had shifted slightly, placing him in a spotlight he never asked for. When the banquet began, tables of strange food were set, each dish glowing or steaming with scents from alien kitchens. Daniel tried to distract himself by studying the plates before him, but every time he looked up, he found the princess watching the crowd. And once, just once, he was certain she looked directly at him again. He lowered his eyes quickly. His thoughts, a storm. He was no ambassador, no warrior, no hero. He was just Daniel, a human lost in the galaxy's grandest hall. Yet somehow, by accident or fate, his simple words had reached the ears of a princess. For the rest of the night, he could not shake the feeling that something had begun, something fragile, dangerous, and impossible. And though Daniel told himself to forget, a quiet voice inside whispered that the princess had not only heard his words, She had remembered them. The hall still glittered with music and voices, but Daniel's mind was caught in a storm. He tried to remind himself that he was nobody important, a young officer with no reason to stand out. The Concord's gathering was filled with leaders, nobles, and figures of history. He was only there to stand straight, follow orders, and not cause embarrassment to his people. But it was already too late. He had spoken without meaning to, and the alien princess had heard him. He kept his head low, hoping the moment would be forgotten. Yet the uneasy weight of her gaze lingered. Every time he dared to glance toward the raised platform, he found her eyes searching the crowd. His chest tightened each time. He told himself he was imagining it, but deep down he knew she was looking for him. Then it happened. As the music shifted into a gentler rhythm, the princess stepped down from the platform. A wave of whispers followed her as she moved gracefully among the guests. Attendants tried to follow, but she lifted her hand lightly, and they obeyed, staying behind. Alone, she walked across the hall with calm steps, her gown flowing like a river of light. Daniel froze. His heart pounded so loudly he feared the aliens nearby could hear it. She was moving toward him. The crowd parted slightly as she drew near. Many diplomats and nobles turned their heads in shock. It was unheard of for the princess to approach an unknown human, especially one so low in rank. Some looked offended, others amused, but all were watching. Daniel stood stiffly, almost forgetting how to breathe, until she stopped in front of him. Her eyes glimmered like starlight as she studied him. For a long moment she said nothing, and Daniel wondered if he should bow, speak, or simply vanish. Finally, she spoke in a voice soft but clear, carrying a strange music that made his chest tighten. "You are human," she said. Daniel swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Highness." His voice cracked slightly, and he cursed himself inside. She tilted her head. "And you think I am gorgeous?" His face turned hot. He wished the floor would open and swallow him whole. Around them, a hush spread through the crowd. Every ear strained to hear his reply. Daniel wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, but lying felt impossible under her gaze. "Yes," he said quietly, but firmly this time. "I do." A ripple of shock went through the hall. Several alien nobles exchanged disbelieving glances. Some muttered, others scowled. A few even laughed behind jeweled hands. No one dared to speak to the princess with such blunt honesty. No one, except this human. To his amazement, the princess did not grow angry. Instead, her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "At last," she murmured, "someone who does not dress his words in silk." Daniel blinked, unsure how to respond. She leaned closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Tell me, human, what do you see when you look at me? Do you see a ruler, a symbol, or only a woman?" Daniel's mouth went dry. He had no speeches prepared, no clever phrases like the diplomats. He spoke as honestly as he could. "I see someone so far above me that I should not even be speaking to her, but also someone who looks lonely, even in a hall this full." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a heartbeat, her calm mask slipped. It was only a flicker, but Daniel saw it, the surprise that someone had noticed. She straightened slowly, and her smile deepened, though it carried a touch of sadness. "You are different from the others," she said softly. The silence of the hall was broken as murmurs spread. Guards shifted uneasily. Advisors whispered to each other in alarm. Some alien nobles glared openly at Daniel, their faces twisted with disapproval. But the princess ignored them all. She turned slightly, gesturing for Daniel to walk with her. He hesitated, but when she began to move, he followed. The crowd opened like a tide, all eyes locked on the strange pair, a royal princess of one of the greatest empires and a nameless human officer. As they walked, she asked questions, not about politics or alliances, but about him. What world he came from, what stories humans told their children, what dreams they held beyond survival. Daniel answered awkwardly at first, but her patience gave him courage. He spoke of Earth's skies, of oceans stretching endless and wild, of music born from sorrow and joy. She listened with genuine interest, as though each word was a rare treasure. When Daniel glanced around, he saw the glares and whispers aimed at him. The other humans shifted nervously, clearly worried for him. The aliens looked offended, as if this small creature had no right to share words with royalty. Yet the princess seemed blind to their judgment. For the first time that evening, Daniel forgot his fear. He spoke not as an officer, but as a human who wanted to be heard. And as the night deepened, the unthinkable happened. The alien princess laughed softly at something he said. The sound was light and beautiful, and the hall fell even quieter, stunned that she would show such warmth to a human. Daniel felt a strange truth settle inside him. He had not just been noticed. He had been chosen. In some way he did not yet understand. And though he knew the danger of standing out, he could not deny the spark that had begun between them. Rumors spread quickly through the station. What began as whispers at the banquet soon echoed in every corridor. The alien princess had spoken to a human, not a diplomat or a general, but an ordinary officer. Some said she had smiled at him, others claimed she had laughed at his words. By morning, the story had already grown into something larger, with details twisted and exaggerated. Daniel felt the weight of it the moment he stepped into the mess hall the next day. His fellow humans stared at him as though he carried a dangerous secret. Some looked worried, others curious, and a few seemed even jealous. He tried to sit quietly with his meal, but one of the senior officers leaned close and whispered urgently, "You need to be careful, Daniel. Whatever happened last night, forget it. Don't let her draw you in. These people don't see us as equals. If you're not careful, you'll embarrass all of us." Daniel nodded silently, though inside his thoughts were tangled. Forgetting was impossible. He could still hear her laugh in his memory, still see the way her eyes had softened when she listened to him. He had never felt so visible and yet so uncertain. That evening, he learned the princess had no intention of forgetting either. She appeared in the observation garden where humans were allowed to walk. The garden was a place of peace, filled with trees and flowers from across the galaxy. Glowing vines curled around pillars, while alien birds sang notes that shimmered like crystal. Daniel had come there only to clear his thoughts, but when he saw her standing beneath the starlit dome, his heart stumbled. "Your Highness," he said quickly, bowing. She smiled faintly. "I thought you would be here." He hesitated. "You were looking for me?" "I was." Her eyes studied him with the same intensity as before. "Your people fascinate me. So many speak of alliances and strength, but you speak of skies, oceans, and songs. Why?" Daniel swallowed, unsure how to answer. He felt clumsy beside her grace, but he forced himself to speak honestly. "Because that's what makes us who we are. We don't have the power of your empires or the wisdom of your ancient councils, but we have hope. Even when everything seems impossible, we keep dreaming. Without that, we wouldn't have survived." The princess was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "Hope. That word is rare among my people. They believe only in order and duty. Perhaps that is why I find you different." Before Daniel could reply, voices rose nearby. Two Illyrian nobles stepped into the garden, their robes flowing like molten silver. Their eyes narrowed as they saw the princess with a human. "Your Highness," one said sharply, "this is unseemly. You should not lower yourself to speak with such a creature." Daniel stiffened, but the princess raised her hand calmly. "You forget yourselves. I speak with whom I choose." The nobles exchanged a look of outrage but bowed stiffly before leaving. Their footsteps echoed with anger as they disappeared into the hall. Daniel exhaled slowly, realizing he had been holding his breath. "They hate me," he said quietly. "They fear what they do not understand," she corrected. "And perhaps they fear me as well. I am their princess, but I am not blind. I see the emptiness in their words, the chains of tradition. You remind me there is more to life than that." Daniel felt a strange warmth spread through him. He wanted to tell her she deserved more than a life of duty, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he said simply, "I'm glad you don't regret hearing me." Her smile deepened, soft and genuine. "Regret? No, Daniel. I am grateful." Their conversations continued in secret over the following days, sometimes in the garden, sometimes in the shadowed corners of the station, where guards and nobles could not easily see. Liara asked endless questions about Earth's storms, its music, its wars, and its victories. Daniel told her of human courage and foolishness, of mistakes that taught lessons, of people who rose from nothing to change everything. She listened with rapt attention, as though his words painted colors she had never seen. But outside their quiet moments, the storm was building. Nobles whispered of disgrace. Rival factions saw danger in the princess's curiosity. Even some humans grew anxious, warning Daniel that he was stepping into waters far too deep. One night, as Daniel left the garden, he overheard two alien envoys, speaking in low voices. "The princess grows too fond of him," one muttered. "If this continues, it could weaken her family's standing. We cannot allow it." The other nodded grimly. "We will watch him. And if he oversteps, he will be removed." Daniel walked away with his chest tight. He knew he was in danger now, not only of embarrassment but of becoming a target. Yet when he thought of her eyes, her laughter, her quiet questions, he knew he could not turn away. The galaxy was vast and filled with power beyond his reach. But in that vastness, an alien princess had chosen to hear a human's voice. And Daniel realized with a mixture of fear and wonder that something extraordinary was beginning, something that no whispers, no threats, and no traditions could easily erase. The Concord's grand hall filled once more with light and music. This time, the gathering was not for celebration, but for a cultural exchange. Each species was asked to show a part of its heritage, its art, its strength, its values. For the Illyrians, it was a chance to demonstrate their grace and power. For the humans, it was their first true test in front of the galaxy. Daniel had not expected to be chosen. He thought the ambassadors or scientists would take part, but fate proved otherwise. The rival Illyrian noble, the same man who had glared at him before, had arranged it. He stepped forward in the council and declared loudly, "If the humans believe they belong among us, let them prove it with a challenge. Let one of their kind face the trials of endurance, as all honored species have done." The human delegation hesitated. None of them were prepared for this. The trial was famous, designed to push body and spirit beyond limits. The noble's eyes searched the humans with hidden satisfaction, until they stopped on Daniel. "This one," he said smoothly. "The princess seems so fond of him. Let him show us what his kind are made of." The words cut through the hall like a blade. Daniel felt dozens of eyes turn to him. His stomach tightened, but when he saw Liara's face, calm yet tense, he knew the noble had chosen him on purpose. Daniel wanted to refuse. He was no champion, no athlete, but if he walked away, humans would be mocked as cowards forever. And worse, Liara would be humiliated for defending him. He took a slow breath and nodded. "I will face the trial," he said. The noble's smile was sharp and cold. The trial was held in the great arena, a space carved deep within the station. Thousands of beings gathered, their voices filling the air like thunder. Daniel stood alone at the center, dressed only in a plain uniform. Across from him, the challenge began. Obstacles that tested balance, walls to climb, shifting floors that tried to throw him down. Then came waves of illusions designed to confuse the mind, followed by long stretches of silence and darkness. The other species had trained for this all their lives. Daniel had not. His arms ached, his legs trembled, his lungs burned. At times, he wanted to stop, to fall and let it end. The crowd laughed, some jeered openly. He was weaker than the Illyrians, slower than the avian warriors, clumsier than the insectoid climbers. But each time he stumbled, he stood again. Each time the illusions whispered failure, he clenched his jaw and pushed forward. When the silence pressed against him, he filled it with memories, His mother's voice, his father's smile, the stories of Earth's endless sky. And when his body screamed in pain, he whispered to himself, "Just one more step, just one more." In the stands, Liara leaned forward, her hands clenched tightly. She could see he was struggling, but she also saw something none of the others noticed. He refused to quit. He was not graceful, not powerful, but he was relentless. The trial stretched on. Sweat dripped into Daniel's eyes. His chest heaved with every breath, yet he kept moving. When he finally crossed the last platform and collapsed on the stone floor, the arena fell into shocked silence. He had finished, not quickly, not flawlessly, but he had endured what was meant to break him. The Illyrian noble rose to his feet, ready to mock. He barely survived. This proves nothing. But then, from the far side of the arena, clapping began. It was faint, at first, but then grew louder, joined by voices of species who valued determination above perfection. Soon the hall filled with a strange sound. Applause for a human. Daniel sat on the floor, too exhausted to stand, but when he looked up, he saw Liara smiling. Not the polite smile of a princess, but a proud, unguarded smile that made his chest ache. Later, when the crowd had left, Liara found him resting against a wall. She knelt beside him, her gown pooling on the floor. "You should not have been forced into this," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "If I had refused, they would have said all humans were cowards. I couldn't let that happen." She touched his arm gently, her eyes bright. "Do you know what I saw? Not weakness, not failure. I saw a spirit that will not bow. That is something even my people have forgotten." Daniel smiled faintly, though his body still trembled with exhaustion. "I only did what any human would." Her gaze lingered on him. "Then perhaps your people are far greater than the galaxy believes." In that moment, Daniel realized the trial had done more than test him. It had shown her something she had been searching for, something hidden in humanity, something worth protecting. But even as warmth filled his chest, a shadow lingered. He knew the noble who had forced this would not stop. Daniel had survived the trial, but he had also painted a larger target on his back, and somewhere in the depths of the station, plans were already forming to ensure the human would not rise any higher. The station never truly slept, but there were hours when its endless corridors grew quiet and the great halls emptied of noise. It was during such a time that danger came. Daniel had been walking back to his quarters after another long day of duty. His body was still sore from the trial, but his mind was strangely light. Every time he remembered Liara's smile as he crossed the finish, his heart felt stronger. He was tired, but proud. He did not see the shadow following him. In another part of the station, the Illyrian noble who had set the trial watched from his chamber with narrowed eyes. Daniel's endurance had ruined his plan. Instead of humiliating the humans, the officer had won unexpected respect. Worse, the princess herself had been seen smiling at him. The noble's power in court was already shaking, and he knew he had to act before he lost more. So he gave an order. The assassin was not Illyrian, but from a world known for silence and poison. It slipped through the station unseen, its body blending with the metal walls. Its eyes glowed faintly as it tracked its prey, the human officer who had become a threat. Daniel reached the narrow walkway that curved along the observation dome. Stars spread out before him, a sea of silver dust and burning fire. He slowed, drawn by the sight. It reminded him of Earth's sky, though far grander. He pressed his hand against the glass, forgetting his pain for a moment. That was when he heard the faintest sound, a breath where no one should have been. He turned just in time to see the glint of a blade. The assassin lunged from the shadows, fast and deadly. Daniel reacted on instinct, throwing himself aside. The blade cut through the air where his chest had been. He stumbled, heart racing, and shouted for help. But the corridor was empty. The assassin advanced silently, its eyes fixed on him. Daniel had no weapon, no training for this. He backed away, his hands raised. Then, from the far side of the dome, another figure appeared. Liara. She had left her chamber restless, unable to sleep, her mind full of Daniel's voice and the memory of his struggle in the arena. When she saw the flash of movement, she ran without hesitation. "Daniel," she cried. The assassin spun toward her, realizing the princess had arrived. For a moment, it hesitated. Its orders had not included harming her. That pause gave Daniel the chance to act. He lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the attacker. The blade scraped across the floor, sparking against the metal. The struggle was clumsy. Daniel had no skill, only desperation. He grabbed the assassin's wrist, fighting to keep the weapon away from Liara. Pain shot through his arm as the creature twisted, stronger than him. He shouted, forcing himself to hold on. "Run!" he yelled to Liara, but she did not run. Instead, she reached for a control panel on the wall and slammed her hand against it. An alarm shrieked, echoing through the station. The lights flashed red. Guards would come, but not fast enough. The assassin snarled, trying to break free, but Daniel refused to let go. The blade cut across his arm, burning with pain, yet he held tighter, dragging the creature back. Finally, with a burst of strength, he shoved it against the wall. The weapon clattered to the floor. The assassin tried to flee, but guards stormed, and from both sides their weapons raised. In moments, the creature was pinned to the ground, hissing in defeat. Daniel collapsed to his knees, clutching his bleeding arm. Liara dropped beside him, her face pale with fear. "You're hurt," she whispered, reaching for his arm. "It's nothing," he said through clenched teeth. "Are you safe?" Her eyes met his, wide and shining. "You shielded me," she said softly, almost in disbelief. Daniel gave a weak smile. "Couldn't do anything else." The guards dragged the assassin away. Already the station's council members were gathering, demanding answers. The Illyrian noble tried to speak calmly, claiming ignorance, but suspicion filled the air. Too many had seen the assassin strike at the human. Too many had noticed how Daniel had stood in front of the princess without hesitation. By morning, the story had spread. A human officer had saved the life of an Illyrian princess. Some whispered it was foolish luck. Others said it was reckless bravery. But many began to look at humans with new eyes, not as weak creatures, but as beings willing to risk everything for someone they cared about. Liara stayed by Daniel's side as healers closed his wound. She did not hide her worry, even when courtiers whispered angrily that her closeness was unseemly. She ignored them all. When Daniel finally opened his eyes again after the treatment, she was there. "You could have died," she said softly. He managed a faint laugh. "Better me than you." Her hand tightened on his. She had been surrounded by warriors her whole life, by soldiers sworn to protect her. But none of them had acted as he had, not out of duty, but out of pure instinct, pure heart. For the first time, Liara felt something she had never known before. Trust. And though Daniel was too tired to see it, the noble who had sent the assassin watched from the shadows, his face twisted with rage. His plan had failed again, and now the human was no longer just a curiosity. He was becoming a symbol. That, the noble swore, could not be allowed to continue. The station's council chamber was a place of shining glass and silver stone, designed to impress and to remind every visitor of the conquered's power. It was here that the debate began. Word of the assassination attempt had spread like fire, and every faction now demanded answers. The Illyrian noble who had plotted against Daniel tried to speak first, his voice smooth and practiced. "This incident only proves what I have said before. Humans are unpredictable, reckless, and dangerous to our order. They bring chaos wherever they go. Last night was proof." His words stirred murmurs across the chamber. Some agreed, nodding, their eyes sharp on the small group of humans standing at the edge of the floor. Others looked uncertain. Liara rose, before anyone else could answer. She stepped forward, her gown flowing like liquid light, her presence commanding. When she spoke, her voice carried through the chamber with calm strength. You call them reckless, she said, her eyes fixed on the noble. Yet when I stood in danger, when death reached for me, it was not Illyrian guards who saved me. It was a human. One who had no duty, no command, no expectation. Yet he placed himself between me and the blade. The chamber quieted. Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Daniel stood among the humans, his arm still bound with healing cloth. He felt heat rise to his face as dozens of alien eyes turned toward him. He wanted to disappear, but Liara's voice kept him rooted in place. Is that chaos? She continued. Or is it courage? The noble's smile faltered. Courage, born of ignorance. He acted without thought as a child might. That is not strength. It is foolishness. Liara's eyes narrowed. Then perhaps we need more of such foolishness. Perhaps what this galaxy has forgotten is that sometimes the greatest strength is not in power, but in heart. The council stirred. Some nodded slowly, others whispered in disagreement. The human ambassadors exchanged uneasy looks. This was not the careful diplomacy they had planned, but Liara was relentless. She turned to Daniel. Come forward. His stomach tightened, but he forced his feet to move. He walked into the circle of light at the center of the chamber. His uniform was plain, his posture stiff, but his presence was undeniable. Tell them, Liara said gently. Tell them what it means to be human. Daniel's throat felt dry. He looked around at the endless faces, at species older and stronger than his own. He had no speech prepared, no elegant words, but he remembered the trial, the whispers, the blade in the dark. And he remembered the earth, the blue sky, the oceans, the endless horizon. So he spoke. We're not the strongest, he began quietly. We're not the smartest. We don't live as long as most of you. If you measure us by power, then yes, we're weak. But that's not the whole truth. His voice steadied as he went on. We've survived storms, wars, and disasters. We've made mistakes, terrible ones, but we learn. And no matter how many times we fall, we stand again. That is what it means to be human, to try, to fail, and still to keep going. The chamber was silent. Every eye watched him, waiting. We dream, Daniel continued. Even when the stars are far, we reach for them. Even when others tell us it's impossible, we keep moving. And when someone we care about is in danger, we don't think about strength or weakness. We act. Because that's what our hearts tell us to do. He stopped, his chest tight, unsure if he had said too much or too little. But the silence lingered. At last, one of the older council members spoke, her voice slow and thoughtful. Perhaps there is more to humanity than we believed. Others murmured agreement. Some still shook their heads, unwilling to be swayed. But the chamber no longer felt certain. Daniel had shaken something loose. The Illyrian noble's eyes burned with anger, but he forced a smile. Pretty words, he said coldly. But words do not change the nature of a species. We must not let sentiment cloud judgment. Liara stepped beside Daniel, her voice calm but firm. Sentiment is not weakness. It is life. And if the galaxy has forgotten that, then perhaps it is humanity's role to remind us. For the first time, Daniel saw fear flicker in the noble's gaze. Not fear of him, but of what he represented. A spark that could not be controlled. The session ended without a decision, but the shift was undeniable. As Daniel left the chamber, whispers followed him. Not of mockery, but of curiosity, respect, even admiration. Later, in the quiet of the garden, Liara found him again. You spoke from your heart, she said softly. You showed them what I already saw. Daniel smiled faintly. I just told the truth. She studied him for a long moment. The truth, she whispered, may be the most dangerous thing of all. The stars shone above them, distant and eternal. And though Daniel felt the weight of what had happened, he also felt something new, something fragile but powerful. The council chambers were quiet now, but the tension in the station had not faded. News of Daniel's courage and Liara's support had spread across the Concord. Whispers of admiration, surprise, and disbelief filled every corridor. Humans were no longer invisible. They were seen, and for the first time, their small presence carried weight. The Illyrian noble who had tried to destroy Daniel's reputation was cornered. His schemes had been exposed. The assassination attempt, the trial meant to humiliate, the manipulation of council votes. He had expected humans to falter, to hide, to fail. Instead, he had witnessed a truth his ambition could not erase. Humans fought with heart, and even the most powerful could not predict them. Daniel stood in the observation garden beside Liara. The air was cool, scented with alien flowers that glowed faintly in the starlight. His arm had healed enough to move without pain, but he still carried the memory of the blade and the struggle that had nearly ended him. Liara's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, her gaze fixed on the stars above. "You changed everything," she said softly. "I just survived," he replied, though he knew it was more than that. He had faced every challenge, stood in the path of danger, and spoken words that no human had dared to speak before a gathering of alien leaders. "You did more than survive," Liara said. "You reminded the galaxy that strength is not only in power or history, it is in courage, in heart, in the choice to protect what is important." Daniel looked at her, surprised by the weight of her words. The princess, royal beyond measure, was saying that he had made a difference. Not because of his rank or skill, but because he had been human, honest, brave, and unafraid to act. Across the station, the council had reached a decision. The Illyrian noble was stripped of his duties and confined while the investigation concluded. His ambitions had collapsed under the simple truth of Daniel's actions and Liara's support. The humans were officially recognized as members of the Conquered, no longer ignored, no longer dismissed. Their place in the galaxy was secure, and respect, tentative but real, had been earned. For Daniel, the approval of councils and nobles meant less than the moment he shared with Liara in the garden. She turned toward him, her eyes bright with motion. "You know," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips, "I never thought a human could teach me so much." Daniel laughed softly. "I'm not sure I'm the teacher here." "But you are," she insisted. "You've shown me the courage to speak, to act, to care without fear. And now, others are beginning to see it too." The stars reflected in her eyes, and Daniel realized that no imperial crown, no power, no ceremony could compare to the respect and trust in her gaze. He felt small beside her, yet somehow infinite, as though the universe itself had opened to allow a human to step forward. Days passed, and life in the station slowly returned to its rhythm. Delegates continued their business, ceremonies proceeded, and alien species debated and plotted as always. Yet Daniel and the humans were no longer part of the background. They moved among the corridors with cautious confidence, their voices heard, their presence acknowledged. The bond between Daniel and Liara grew in quiet moments. They spoke of Earth and Illyrian worlds, of hopes, of dreams, and of what lay beyond the stars. She asked endless questions, and he answered as honestly as he could. She laughed at his stories of clumsy attempts at human inventions, and he marveled at the elegance of her world. Together they built a friendship, and something more, that no rank or tradition could deny. And then came the day when the Concord held a ceremony to honor those who had acted with bravery. Daniel was called forward, not as a human officer, but as a symbol. He stood tall as the council acknowledged his actions, the crowd of species murmuring in surprise and admiration. Liara stood beside him, her hand briefly brushing his. It was a quiet gesture, yet it spoke louder than any words. Daniel realized that the galaxy was not just a place of power and fear. It was a place where courage mattered, where truth could shift the tide, where even a human, small, fragile, and ordinary, could leave a mark stronger than any army. When the ceremony ended, the stars outside the station shone brighter than ever. Daniel and Liara walked together along the observation deck side by side, sharing stories and laughter. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, full of dangers, wonders, and mysteries yet to explore. And though no one could know what the future held, one thing was certain. Humans had shown that their hearts could not be ignored. They had proven that bravery was not measured in power alone, but in choices, actions, and the willingness to stand for what mattered most. Liara looked at Daniel, her smile soft and real. "You've done more than survive," she said. Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of her words in every fiber of his being. "We've only just begun," he replied, and together they gazed at the stars, knowing that the story of humans and courage would be told across the galaxy for generations to come. A story of heart, of bravery, and of the power that even the smallest species could wield when they dared to act.